Chair Carroll. Here. Commissioner Bland. Commissioner Chapin.
Here.
Commissioner Chen.
Here.
Commissioner Devonshire.
Here.
Commissioner Goldman. Commissioner Gustafson.
Here.
Commissioner Holford-Smith. Here. Commissioner Lutfi. Commissioner Shamir-Barron.
Here.
Commissioner Halls.
Good morning, Commissioners. We're going to start the Preservation Department public hearing agenda with item number 1. This is LPC 19-30247, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 629, Lot 7504. 79 8th Avenue manufacturers Hanover Trust individual landmark. A new classical style bank building designed by Lewis Coors and built in 1907. Application is to install banners.
Good morning, Commissioners. Michelle Perry, Preservation Staff. This item is for work at 79 8th Avenue, which is the manufacturer's Hanover Trust Company building, an individual landmark located at the southwest corner of 8th Avenue and 14th Street in Manhattan. The proposal is to install 3 banner signs at masonry piers, including 2 flanking the main entrance at the 8th Avenue facade and 1 at the pier closest to the 14th Street corner. This slide shows the context of neighboring buildings at this intersection, including another adaptively reused bank building housing a CVS at the northwest corner of 8th Avenue and 14th Street. Each of the 3 proposed banners will be the same size, measuring 23 feet 9 inches tall and 6 feet wide. The material is a mesh, which reads as a solid from a distance. There's a sample of the material here if anyone would like to see it. The banners will be attached utilizing aluminum frames with 7 mounting anchors for each banner. The applicant has expressed that potentially due to the low wind load of the banner material, the number of anchoring points could be reduced. There are 7 anchoring points shown here, could be as few as 6 potentially. The following slides include other examples of banners found in museum buildings, including 2 examples of the Metz Fifth Avenue and Posters locations, as well as other examples in the city previously approved by the LPC and also within a broader context. The applicant, as well as a representative of the Museum of Illusions, are here and would like to say a few words before answering any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Lauren Rosen, and I own Artifacts. We're based outside of Hartford, Connecticut, and I'm here representing the Museum of Illusions. Our intent with the 3 banners, basically, we're looking at identification for what goes on inside. They're a banner that's fabricated out of mesh. I've left a sample and I've also brought one. And the material, it allows wind to pass, so there's no wind resistance. So our intent here was, 1, to get a broader field of advertisement for what happens inside. It's a fairly big building. On the 14th Street side, we have 101 feet. By DOB standards, we're allowed 500 square feet of signage on that one side alone. With this presentation, we're up against basically, it's a traditional building built in 1906. We're trying to do an installation which requires the least amount of attachments to the walls. So as Michelle mentioned, we could provide 6 attachments, minimal impact, and all the attachments go into the mortar joints. They're 3/8 of an inch, and they don't go beyond the mortar joints. My concern in a projecting banner or a projecting presentation, it's a windy area, and I'm concerned about wind load. I'm also concerned about coming down from Hartford, Connecticut to replace these banners once every few months or once a year after they're tattered. So our choice was to go against the building, to use a mesh material with an installation that's easily changed. The banners sit into kind of a holster device, So they are lifted up and out for change. They're stretched like a canvas would be stretched around this metal frame. And I know, we've seen projecting banners time and time again, so they become the tradition, they become the norm. This may not be the norm, but it's also an approach. They are banners, they are feasible, they are low maintenance, and we've positioned them on the pilasters in front of the building on the side that don't interrupt any building detail at all. So with that said, that's our intent. And Renee, maybe you want to say a few words about the museum and what you're doing there?
Good morning. My name is Renee Jomi. I'm the CEO of the Museum of Illusions. I want to thank you for this opportunity to present our museum. I'm not sure what to say. I was thinking this morning that obviously my concern is people being aware that we are a museum. My concern goes first to the lovely people I hired, 15, 20 people, so they have a job for a long time. Signed with us for 15 years. We've been open for a month. A lot of good things going on in the museum. It's a very wholesome museum. During the Jewish holidays, I had a lovely Rabbi Israel Goldberg from the Bronx. He said, "This is such a kosher museum," and I was happy to hear that. And he said, "I'll see you guys in 6 months during Rosh Hashanah." So we have other museums in Europe. This is the first one in the United States. Over the past 3 years, it's been very successful. We've had already a lot of school tours came and saw us. We're doing a lot of free admissions with certain places that are close to my heart. Ronald McDonald House. I work across the street from them. At a restaurant, and I remember all the families coming meeting there, so I said, we're open now, so everyone's staying at the Ronald McDonald House, and people work at the Ronald McDonald House. They have free access. We have a partnership with UNICEF, with our other museums in Europe. We're going to be doing it also in New York. Every year when UNICEF's anniversary happens, which is in December, they take the museum and turn it into a museum of reality. And they show through different playful ways, statistics, showing how little, or how bad people, kids live in war-torn countries and poor countries. So that's going to be happening probably once a year, probably not this year because we just opened. We're getting Title I schools in for free, even though we're a for-profit museum for children with disabilities. We started a sponsorship with Samsung. They're around the corner from us. We're sending their customers to experience their newest devices, take pictures at our museum. They're sending about 40 to 50 guests, their customers, every 2 weeks. So a lot of good stuff, a lot of cheerful, a lot of laughing kids, a lot of positive energy. That's all I'm going to say.
Anyone have any questions? Are the 3 signs intended for identity, or will they be absolute show changing exhibits?
Just identity. Lauren said if we have something else going on, that we're going to change it. It's not right. It's not correct. It's just for identity. We're not going to. We're probably going to change things as we do in our other museums every year and a half, but that does not change. We're not going to be changing the banners. It's whatever you guys approve. We'll just.
They are changeable, and I think that was my point.
Thank you.
All right.
Take public testimony on that.
Thank you for your time.
Liaison Mitchell?
Hello, my name is Louisa Winchell and I represent the Greenwich Village Society for Historic Preservation. GVSHP applauds the reuse of 79 8th Avenue as a museum and supports those efforts. That said, this individual landmark is a particularly beautiful example of neoclassical architecture anchored a prominent corner of West 14th Street and needs to be treated sensitively and honorably. Therefore, we believe that the amount of signage could be reduced, specifically at the pilasters along West 14th Street. We ask that the fastening method to the masonry be as minimally intrusive as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. President Emma?
Good morning. Jesse Gunn with the Historic District Council. HDC is pleased to see the adaptive reuse of the spine bank building for a museum. While the banners are integral to the museum's visibility and therefore success, we believe they could be reduced in width. We ask that the commission require the applicant to anchor the banners into the mortar joint of the stone. This is Tuckahoe marble, which is soft stone, and the less punctures in it, the better. And I believe the applicants addressed that last in their presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this application? We have a resolution from the Committee of Approve recommending denial of the application. Architectural features detract and distract from the historic character of the building, and the proposed method of installation would do harm to the fabric of the building. So would you like to respond to some of the comments? There were comments about the size or number of banners. Come up.
Yes, I could say this. Initially, our proposal was for 7 banners. That wasn't my idea. And I represent clients. And we're busy. We're a busy company. If we do 1 banner or 50, it makes no difference to me. But I thought for the building, 3 banners was entirely sufficient. So I volunteered that right off at the subcommittee. So we reduced from 7 to 3. The other thing we made certain of is that we reduced the size of the front banners by 22%. We reduced the width of the banner that's remaining on 14th Street by 30%. And we decided to make all the banners a uniform size. As far as, there's a couple of things to look at with the limestone. And I know a little bit about stone, I know a little bit about architecture. You know, in some circles I'm known as the sign guy, but I've taken extensive courses in art and art history and architecture and the history of American architecture. You know, it's a limestone. There's been some damage. And I'm sure with those front pilasters, with the right company, there's fewer and fewer around. There may be a great restoration company, you know, for thousands and thousands of dollars that eventually, when the museum's bringing in some good capital, they could pay to have this restored. In the interim, with this mesh, it hides a multitude. And in fact, in front, it hides the greatest of all the damage. There's pock marks throughout the front two pilasters, which is unfortunate, but limestone is a very soft material. My concern about the projecting banners with the armatures, we need something pretty substantial that's got to be engineered. That may go into the mortar joints, but it's going to go beyond the mortar joints, and it's going to be fairly, there's going to be thicker bolting and thicker armatures, and if it goes past a certain distance from the building, let's say if it's 2 or 3 or 4 feet wide, I have to check the exact zoning. We have to come back to the building with what are called guy wires, G-U-Y, and that sets up for 4 more attachments. Plus there's wind load that batters it back and forth, and you're looking for even more damage. honestly speaking, with this method, you're looking at the least amount of penetrations, the thinnest penetrations, and they're entirely reparable by a mason that doesn't have to be a master genius. So that's part of the logic. Plus, this is identity. It dresses up the building for the museum. It may be contrary to a neo-classical Greek revival that was built in 1906. We didn't mean for the banners to tie in with that type of architecture. It would be kind of ridiculous because that's not what the museum's about. We meant to bring the museum outside to the public and try to give honor to the building by only taking the flat areas of the pilasters and leaving a border around. And granted, they could be smaller, they could be smaller, they could be smaller. We could put 3 postage stamps up, they could keep getting smaller. But we felt that this was an adequate size and relativity to what we're allowed by the DOT. And I know landmarks takes precedent. So we hope you'll see our logic.
Thank you. Are there any last questions? We have a motion to close the hearing.
Second.
All in favor? Hearing is closed. So I think, for us, the question is whether the size, whether the installation method will cause irreversible damage or irreparable damage, and whether the size and number and height overwhelms the building or detracts from architectural features. And I think, as Michelle presented earlier, the commission has a history of approving banners for cultural institutions. Lots of times they are either smaller, thinner stretch banners, or sometimes banners hanging between columns. I think we've done it less often at all on the face of the face of the building. So we've heard testimony from the applicant that a projecting stretch banner may actually cause more damage due to the installation method needed for the weight. And so the question for you all is, would something flat on the face of the stone be appropriate at a certain size?
First, I consider the pilasters on this building as an individual landmark to be as important a detail as any of the art material. Absolutely. And so I'm coming from there. The presentation that a vertical banner may have to be more substantial, whatever. This is something that's been asserted, but it's not something that we haven't seen the design, we haven't seen any material. I think there are too many banners, and I think they're too large, and I would be willing to approve, even if they're flat, banners that are mounted in the mortar joints, stucco marble, very flat, and small.
Two smaller ones.
Yeah, both sides of the corner.
Anyone else? Any thoughts?
I agree with what Mike said, and I do think the banners could be a little smaller, and the method of attachment is important. I think it's important, but also though, for there to be identification on both 14th Street and the 8th Avenue. So if the banners are going to be hung the same exact way, then I actually think that it makes sense to have 2. If they're going to be hung a different way, where they're banners projected from the building, then I think one on 8th Avenue and one on 14th Street makes sense. Otherwise, I think it's weird to only have one banner at the entrance.
But not non-symmetrical.
Yeah, non-symmetrical. Yeah.
I agree with that, and I think they can be a bit smaller, but to tell you the truth, I'm much more offended by the CVS lettering across the street than I am by banners on this building. So, I mean, to the extent that offense is the right thing, then doesn't matter, but I find it undermines the kind of stature of the individual landmark across the street, but here, not so. Only because we have a reference for banners on institutional buildings and cultural monuments as well. So I think a little bit smaller is fine, but 3.
Question? I just wanted to, later, I apologize. Could you talk about the possibility of having it tethered and kind of stretched instead of on a rack, which would allow you to put anchors in more remote locations that might not be so?
We did not talk about that.
That's been done a lot on the museums where the banner is kind of tethered, stretched, and you can put the anchors in places that are more distance. It doesn't make it look outstanding.
Look at it, there's where. It's all.
But you could, if you went out to, let's say, the wider, there's probably a wider masonry joint between the smooth and the vulgar portions. It might be easier to hide something. I don't know.
The attachment.
Assuming we can find a suitable attachment that's the least amount of damage, I guess, then the question is 2 or 3, and it seems like we have, these people have spoken so far, all believe that they should be smaller. There is some difference in the number.
I think the size of it is pretty small. I'm very familiar with the building, I live in Broadway. And it is a very large building, and I'm thrilled that it has a new sector, so many different things. And I can find within the flat banner, obviously, working with staff to make sure that it's done. But I think we should have 2 on the
You agree, Josh? Yes, I am.
Yeah, I agree with that. I have a quick reference that we can think of all the institutions where we put banners and give sometimes put a few banners on very large buildings. This is a large building. So, at the same time, it's an official landmark. Others have been
Okay, so just to make sure I'm understanding, I think you were saying 3 are okay if they're smaller, and we figure out the least intrusive attachment method. Okay.
But I want to say one more thing. I don't think they should be too small. Because then they won't, serve their purpose. And actually, as you said, Kim and others, the building is substantial. So if it's too small, it's just not going to look right.
We don't want it to look
Yeah.
like a postage
Yeah,
stamp.
exactly.
I think that, staff can work with them to do something that's proportional to the architecture, and maybe picks up some of the lines of the features on that side.
I would just say, I agree with that, and I think it's a good mention. I would hope to minimize the width, not necessarily height.
Yeah, he's
Great.
So that's helpful.
Yes, please. So, in the matter of docket 19-30247-79-8,000, manufacturers Hanover Trust. Neoclassical style bank building designed by D. Lamo and Cordes and built in 1907. The application is to install banners. I recommend approval with modifications signed with that. This former bank building has been adaptively used as a museum and therefore has different signage needs. The banners are consistent with the types of signage historically found at museum buildings. That the banners will be installed at the mortar joints and will be easily reversible and will not obscure or conceal highly decorative stonework other significant architectural features. That the mesh material will be in keeping with the range of materials typically used with banner installations. That the banners will not be seen in conjunction with other signage of the building, and therefore the number of signs will not overwhelm the building, and that the work will support the adaptive reuse of the building and help ensure the long-term preservation of the building. However, I find that the size of the banners will overwhelm masonry piers and detract from the building, that the banner frames have a high number of anchorage points along the sides and middle of the banner. Therefore, I recommend that 3 smaller stretch banners with fewer attachment points be installed.
Not stretch banners.
Not stretch. 3 smaller banners. Now, the applicant worked with staff on this, including period.
We have a second? Second. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, that's a short period, but it's not to adjust the size and working with staff on the attachment details.
Okay, next up is item number 2. This is LPC 19-28665, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 474, Lot 14, 53 Mercer Street, DeSoto, cast iron historic lots built in 1862. Application is to construct a rooftop addition.
Good morning, Commissioners, Sabrina Bishop, Preservation staff. The application before you is 53 Mercer Street, which is located between Graham and Broome Streets in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District. The proposal is to construct a 2-story rooftop addition, as well as a bulkhead and glass railings. Please note that the presentation also depicts ongoing work which is pursuant to a certificate of appropriateness from 2009 and subsequent amendments from 2015. This work included the removal of the fire escape and bulkhead and the replacement of storefront infill, as well as staff level restorative work, including paint removal and window replacement. The current rooftop addition needs to be approved by the Commission since a portion of the first floor, as well as the glass railings, will be visible from the south on Mercer Street, as is shown in this rendering. A mock-up was also constructed to illustrate the visibility. You can see the orange netting depicts the volume of the addition, and the black netting depicts the railings. Jordan Rogoff from DXA Studio is here to further expand on the proposal.
Good morning, Commissioners. Jordan Rogoff from DXA Studio. Karina just did a great job presenting the project, so there's not a whole lot more to add to it. I think, as Karina mentioned, there's ongoing work being performed right now on the facade of the building. The bulkhead has been removed, as is the fire escape. What we're really here to talk about is the vertical enlargement, which, to be more precise, is a 1-story addition with mezzanine. So it's less than a third of the floor area for the mezzanine of the floor below, which is the 4th floor. Just go back through the historic images of the building. This is with the fire escape, and that's been removed now. And this was the state of the facade of the building prior to the commencement of the storefront work and taking all the paint off the facade. The building looks fantastic now on the facade. The other element to our proposal here is minor modifications to the rear facade. The rear facade was covered with stucco a number of years ago. We looked to actually remove the stucco, but the brick was far too brittle. So that was, we're opting instead to move forward with recoating and doing minor masonry repairs and replacing the stucco. We want to make minor modifications. We want to take a window located up here, extend that down, do a door, add a door onto this location so that the tenant of the property can use the terrace area as outdoor space. But I'll show you that in elevation shortly. Also is a modification, also in the proposal is a modification to this skylight to make the terrace more usable, so we're reducing a 7-foot skylight to a 2-foot skylight. I'll show that in a moment. The building is in an M15B district with 5 FAR. It's currently built at 7,000 square feet with an allowable of about 12,500 square feet. So our proposal is really just for 1,700 square feet additional zoning square footage. And in gross, that's about 2,000 square feet. So that's about a 1,500 square foot fourth floor. And as I mentioned, the mezzanine just under 500 square feet. So that it's not considered a story. We have a single stair that goes up to it. The fourth floor is set back 20 feet from the street, and then we go back an additional, I think it's just under 18 feet, 17 foot 11 for that mezzanine floor, or what would be considered fifth floor. So at no point is the fifth floor or upper floor mezzanine visible from any area. It's really just the fourth floor that's visible. And we're only coming to you with minimal visibility because pushing the core back further really wasn't an option logistically. All right, so that being said, these are examples of a number of other single and two-story additions that have been approved within the district. This is an elevation of how the building was purchased by our clients. And as Karina mentioned, there's quite a bit of staff level approvals that have transpired since 2009. That's the work that's undergoing. One thing that's worth noting is the adjacent buildings. We have a 100-foot tall building just to the south of us, and then an 82-foot tall building just to the north of us. And the visibility of either of these stories is really only from the vantage point of the secondary facade over top of the two-story neighbor just to the south. So this is, again, how the building appeared prior to the commencement of the work, and this is how we would like this to look following the construction. So again, all of the work being performed was under previous applications of the facade, with the exception of the vertical enlargement. And then this is the rear facade to just show you what we're proposing to do. It would be extending this window down to the level of the terrace. And then on this surface, to show the next slide, provide a door to come out on this terrace, and then an alteration to the skylight, so that's a 2-foot skylight. Oh, okay, I'm sorry, okay. Vertical enlargement here. We are proposing to do this with an Alucobond ring screen panel. So we just want a very clear delineation between the addition and the existing building portion. What I have here are a series of rendered montages starting north of the site, moving all the way down to the south past the site. And what you'll see is there's no visibility even directly across the street from the project. The visibility starts again above the two-story neighboring building to the south. That's 51 Mercer. And what's delineated here is just the tops of what will be the glass guardrails, and then you see the corner of what is the fourth floor. And then that visibility extends from over 51 Mercer about 100 feet to the south before the neighboring building blocks the view. And then this is the same perspectives provided with the mock-up as it's currently constructed. It remains there today if there's a desire to go and check it out. And this is the vantage of raised visibility, which is the corner of the fourth floor, and then the top of the glass rail, which is set back on the for the mezzanine floor. And then going back up to the north. And then these are images of the mock-up on top of the roof. A building section. We, in order to make it minimally visible, really push that fourth floor, floor to floor, down to about 10'2", leaving a 9'4" ceiling height, which was on the part of the client and the sales team. They felt that was an absolute minimum for this to be a leasable commercial space. And then as the mezzanine floor was not visible from any of those perspectives, that floor to floor is a little taller. I think it's an 11 foot, let's see, inch here, 11 foot 10? 11.9, thank you. And then these are the floor plans. What we have is a centralized core in a commercial space located around each floor, and that's everything.
Jordan, you're so close to not being able to.
Yes.
Could you just explain again why you can't push it back a little?
Sure. So we have kind of been progressively pushing it back. When we did the mock-up, we pushed it back further. There's a tipping point, I think, where you push back further and that core starts to subtract too much of the leasable area. So it's not so much of a constructability issue, it's that the net area drops significantly if we push the core back further.
That's your fourth floor plan, so that's the core.
Right.
Yes, Michael?
Follow up on that. Would it be possible without modifying the floor area to change the front, slope the front, so that you would eliminate that a little bit?
I think that is possible. It's just a matter of it not really being such a usable space when we do chamfer it, since we really just have a 9 foot 2 to 9 foot 4 ceiling height. So I mean, if that's something that feel strongly about, I think we can work on that.
On the fourth floor, it's actually the terrace glass rail that we see. Right?
Yeah, on the fourth floor, I think you see. Okay,
There's a
that's
sense
sure.
that if you got rid of the terrace,
To the mock-up one, we got it right here. Right here. So this is the fourth floor. See, I don't believe you see any of the fourth floor guardrails.
the blue, you said.
The blue one?
Yeah.
So what you're seeing is the railing on the roof terrace right above the cornice of the building, and then the railing on the roof of the first floor of the addition.
First, the
So
one
there's
lower
two
level
railings,
addition.
yeah.
I would, let me just go back to that. See, I think we reconciled the glass rail on the fourth floor terrace.
Right,
But then on the fifth floor here, that is visible. And so I think we have the ability to push that back even a little further on top of the fourth floor, serving the mezzanine. I don't think that's an issue. I think chamfering here would get a little trickier with the area below. But if it's something that's felt strong about it, we can definitely.
All right, thanks. Are there any other questions?
I think my question is that, if you slant it a little bit there, maybe shape off another bit.
Okay, was that question?
Which was actually how one of the examples shown was.
That's right.
That's right.
Justified.
That's right. Okay, we'll go to public testimony and then we'll come back. So Jesse Deno?
Good morning, Jessica Bennett for the Historic Districts Council. Small buildings like this early story wall building play a part in creating dynamic historic streetscape because of the drastic variation in scale. There's plenty of room to build atop this building. So much room, in fact, there is no excuse for any non-visibility of the proposed mass. The examples of commission-approved Soho addition provided in the drawings all sit atop buildings that are 5 stories or higher, rendering the appropriateness moot in the case of this 3-story building. The scale of the addition should be reduced so there is no evidence from the street of the aluminum composite facade panels this mass should be popular. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Philpott for the Society for the Architecture of the City. One consideration for regulation in historic districts is whether there should be any attempt to consider the intangibles that, along with fair architectural design of the buildings, made the district a place with special character. When Soho was designated, obviously, it was a dilapidated, half-empty zone of ruinous commercial buildings that barely expressed it like escape becoming an expressway. Architectural history was the rallying cry, the surviving cast iron architecture which it was named, but also recognized was the secondary glamour the district had acquired as a center for artists' studios, and the Commission has protected that history by preserving Frosty Myers the Wall, and more recently built Carr's sculptural door at 102 Green Street. At one time, 3 Mercer was a studio building. Now, the front of the building is being renovated. Architecture is still there, but with one bright white cornice, sills, and lintels, and the regularization of tinkle on ground floor, it would look more like a $10 million townhouse than an old store building. And perhaps in Congress, we are to see this rather stark multi-story, and I say multi-story because although it may well be that the mezzanine and the canopies do not count for zoning, they certainly count. This rather stark multi-story addition comes panels with its glass terrace fence, which, unlike some of the comparables illustrated, is not a conceptual design. It would be helpful if it were not that visible. And having removed the ink from the book, Bluestone Sill and Trim under a 2015 permit is the Bluestone Sill
Thank you, Christina. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this application? Resolution recommending approval of the application. Would you like to respond to any of the comments?
But I think we've taken great efforts to try to make it as minimally visible as possible. And I think all the efforts done on restoring the facade of the building on the three-story existing portion greatly enhances the quality of the building overall.
Any other questions? Can we have a motion to close the hearing?
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye. So the hearing is closed. Regulations on smaller buildings in this and other commercial districts where the context is taller. I think the thing that's kind of nice about this proposal is that it's set back from both the front and the rear. And the rear facade, which has its original shutters, is being maintained. So in some ways, it sort of retains a sense of the original volume and legibility of its typology. I do think that it's so close to not being visible, and because it is a large addition, it would be nice to not have it be visible at all. And so my thought was that it would be appropriate if we could resolve the visibility of the scaffold. Yeah. Everybody agree? Yeah. Yes. Okay.
Yes, and I'd like to commend the applicant for doing a good job on the project.
Okay, John.
In the matter of docket number LPC 19-28665-53 Mercer Street in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District, the application is to construct rooftop additions. I note that the building scale, the style, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Soho Cast Iron Historic District. I recommend approval with a modification, noting that the construction of the proposed two-story rooftop addition and bulkhead will not eliminate any significant architectural features of the roof of the building, that earlier residential buildings were typically converted and expanded as the neighborhood became a commercial hub, and the proposed addition will be consistent with these expansions that characterize this historic district, reflecting the area's layer of development and mixed use. That the scale and stepped massing of the proposed rooftop addition and bulkhead will be set back from the primary and rear facades and therefore will maintain a sense of the building's original massing. That the materials of the proposed rooftop addition, including gray aluminum cladding and glass railings, will be consistent with the materiality of various rooftop structures and installations in the historic district, and that the proposed work will not distract from the special architectural or historic character of the building or the Soho Cast Iron Historic District. However, I find that the glass railings and a portion of the first floor of the rooftop addition will be highly visible from the south in conjunction with the primary facade on Mercer Street. Therefore, I recommend that the applicant work with staff to render the glass railings and first floor of the addition no longer visible.
All in favor? Thank you.
Okay, next is item number 3. This is LPC 19-27998, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 543, lot 67, 133 West 3rd Street in the South Village Historic District. Greek Revival style row house built in 1836 to 1842. The application is to legalize the installation of signage installed without conservation version.
Good morning, Commissioners. Michelle Craig, Preservation Staff. This item is for work at 133 West 3rd Street, which is located on the north side of West 3rd Street between McDougal Street and 6th Avenue in the South Village Historic District. The application is to legalize the installation of a stretch banner without Landmarks Preservation Commission permits. Shown here is the existing conditions of the banner, which was for the first floor ramen restaurant. Shown here is the 1940s tax photo on the left, showing historic signage right here. And on the right is one of the designation photos which shows previous banner installation at the second floor. The following slides show the context of the variety of other business signs that can be found currently in the South Village Historic District. Here on West 3rd Street, that's our building here, looking down and across the street. And then existing conditions on McDougal Street and Thompson Street here. The final slide shows the existing banner design and dimensions, and staff would like to note that it was determined that by the Department of Buildings that the existing dimensions of the sign are not in conformance with the zoning resolution. The applicants are here. Also, do you have any questions?
Would you like to add anything? Would you like to speak on the project?
You don't have to.
No, thank you.
Okay. We go to public testimony. Mitchell.
Hello, I'm Louisa Winshaw. I represent the Greenwich Village Society for Historic Preservation. GVSHP feels that this particularly bright yellow banner prominently displayed on this Greek Revival Roadhouse does not warrant legalization. A more appropriate and more subdued banner would be a preferable and more suitable choice at this location. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak?
Resolution for approval. Approval provided that
Anchoring of the resources and water transit does not disturb historic materials. Is there anything you'd want to say? Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
I've asked staff, are the fasteners driven into mortar joints here, or are they into the bricks?
As far as I can tell from looking at the ground, they are just in the bricks, as were previous installations.
Are they in the same spots that the banner was attached to the wall when it was designated?
No, you can see some of the previous penetrations here in this.
And one aspect of this doesn't conform to the zoning.
So it's to the projection.
Question for staff, basically, the existing condition covenant on where the banners, is certain typical of village, are these all non-compliant or historically,
So these are all, these are all LPC compliant in the sense that they were existing before designation of the South Village Historic District. I do believe that also these are not compliant with the zoning resolution. I don't know if they have violations in place right now, but.
I assume they probably would require.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I think that there's sort of two things. One, it doesn't conform to the zoning resolution. So I think that it doesn't make sense for us to approve something that ultimately is going to have to potentially get a DOB violation and have to be changed. And then secondly, I think historically we have been a little more conservative about banners for retail establishments and have encouraged bracket signs and lieu of the traditional type of signage. I think in this case, bracket sign would have to be installed above the first floor in order again to be complied with zoning to be 10 feet above the sidewalk. But that's an alternative, is a bracket sign slightly above the structure level, or just a smaller banner. But I would recommend the bracket sign. I don't know, has any other experience?
I agree that the bracket sign would be much better. I'm not even sure that the right in terms of the height, because this building does have a pretty high base, I'm not mistaken, a couple steps. So I can see it under, and I I think that while there's no question that there's a lot of the content, which is part of the character of the district, including the age of the building, its residential or it seem to be to suggest that we should do
Motion to close the hearing. Second. All in favor? Thank you, Michael, I agree. Any other thoughts?
In the matter of LPC 1927998, 133 West 3rd Street in South Village Historic District, a River style row house built in 1836 to 42, the application is to legalize the installation of signage without landmarks preservation commission permit. I know the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the South Village Historic District, and I recommend approval of modifications finding that the work does not damage or obscure any significant architectural features, and that this block features a wide variety of signage types and sizes, therefore the presence of a projecting sign is in keeping with the commercial character of the landscape. However, I find that although a stretch banner was present at this building and at other buildings in the historic district at the time of designation, these types of installations did not exist historically. If the large size of the banner does not conform to the zoning resolution and its scale overwhelms the building, that the banner sign be removed and the facade be repaired, and that a bracket sign which conforms to the zoning resolution be installed in the existing banner location above the first floor.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. On to item number 4, this is LPC 19-28288, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 44, Lot 28, 489 Broadway, in the Solar Cast Iron Historic District. An Italianate style factory and store building built in 1860. The application is to install storefront and building signage.
Good morning, Commissioners. Brian Blazak, Preservation Staff. I will be presenting this proposal, and the applicants are here after the presentation to answer any questions that you may have. The subject property is 489 Broadway at the northwest corner of Broadway and Broom Streets. As noted, a certificate of appropriateness was issued for the installation of new storefront infill at Broadway and the eastern bays of Broom Street, which you can see highlighted here in the awnings. The proposal before you today is to remove masonry infill while retaining the historic cast iron piers at 2 bays west of the approved infill facing Broom Street. To install new storefront infill with operable display windows, to install a vitrine, and to install a bulkhead and awnings to match the adjacent approved storefronts. The new infill is modeled to be in keeping with the adjacent infill. However, an existing interior partition precludes installing a display window in this area. As you can see, I'm highlighting this restroom here. In response to this condition, the applicant has proposed creating a vitrine, this area here, while maintaining the awning above and the bulkhead below. A full elevation of the Broom Street facade shows how the infill compares with the existing, and as seen in section. Lastly, the proposed colors are in keeping with the existing color scheme of the building. In summary, this proposal is being reviewed by the Commission due to the operable display windows and the introduction of a vitrine. Again, the applicants are here to any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. More than add.
Okay, First Week Architects. Yeah, just to point out that we've been restoring the facade of this building. Oh, can't hear me? We've been restoring the facade of this building for a couple of years now, since the new ownership took over. And these 2 bays we're finally have gotten to. One was just bricked up and painted, and the other, and had a very utilitarian entry door to the apartments above. And we'd like to do these last 2 bays in keeping with the rest of the facade. It's done pretty well, and just continue that language down in these 2 bays.
Are there any questions? Is there anyone who'd like to speak on this application? And denial of the full size sign is exclusive and attractive to the historic character. I recommend painting the glass instead. Would you like to respond to that comment, please?
I think it's okay either way. We had very little space to do anything. This was wall behind, whether it's a vitrine or back end of the glass.
And would that sign be for the tenant behind the new infill or for a tenant use?
No, this is for the tenant. And we figured we'd give them an opportunity to show them it is, put something low key.
Or the menu or
Yeah, something like that.
Are there any other questions? Is there a motion to close the hearing? All in favor? We have, in this particular district, actually seen a number of proposals to do different because there are often elevators with managers. So we have approved that. In the past, we have also allowed for menus or other things that managers to be installed. So I don't know if there are any particular thoughts about this one.
It serves its purpose and it doesn't detract from the integrity of the
Right, and it unifies the nights of the servants that are approved for the everyday days and resolves this awkward situation. Okay, great, so a motion to approve it.
In the matter of LPC 19-282-88-489 Broadway, Soho, Cast Iron Historic District. An Italian-made style factory and store building built in 1860. Application to install storefront window and signage. I know that the building's style, scale, materials, and use are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Soho Cast Iron Historic District. I recommend approval, finding that the proposed work will not eliminate significant historic fabric, that the non-historic brick infill will be removed and the historic cast iron piers will be retained, and the new storefront infill will fit within the openings framed by its piers. That the proposed storefront infill, featuring profiles of wood framing, panel bulkheads, large display windows, and fixed transoms, is in keeping with the existing commission-approved storefronts at this building, and recalls the configuration of the portions of historic storefronts found within the historic district. That the operable display windows will be in keeping with the varied commercial character of the historic district. That the operability of the windows will not be perceptual when the windows are closed, helping the installation to remain a discrete presence within the streetscape. That the creation of a vitrine-like space behind the glass of the window with screens and existing restroom will maintain a sense of transparency and consistency of the storefront. And that the proposed work will help to beautify the ground floor storefronts of the Broadway Street facade.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed?
Thank you very much.
Next up is item number 5, LPC 19-26563, an application for a certificate of appropriateness for Mercer Manhattan, Block 1231, Lot 55, 2309 Broadway, aka 2309 to 2315 Broadway, 250 to 260 West 84th Street. This is in the Riverside West End Historic District, Division 1. Art Deco style commercial building designed by Sugarman and Berger, built in 1930 to 31. The application is to replace storefront info.
Good morning, Commissioners. Emma Waterloo, President and staff. The item before you is for 2309 Broadway in the Riverside West End Historic District Extension 1. The building is located on the west side of Broadway between West 83rd and West 84th Streets, and the application is to install off-premise storefront info. Here are some photos of the building over time. The subject storefront is directly to the right of the main entrance, which will orient to the changes of this building space over time. Here are some existing conditions photographs, and this is the storefront here. Briefly, this is the existing storefront and the elevation of the building. And here is the proposed elevation. The storefront is proposed to be made of black finished gold steel. The shaded portions of the glazing in this elevation here and here will be a coated textured glass, while the portion shown in white will be a vision glass. This slide shows the existing and proposed rendering side by side. Here are some detailed elevations and sections. It should be noted that there is a drop ceiling than the storefront opening here, as well as a column that is encased down here in the plan. This slide shows a clear proposed conditions rendering, including the proposed security camera, which can be reviewed at staff level, and the proposed heat lamp. There are also some examples of operable storefront info in the area. So the applicants are here to answer any additional questions or explain anything that you might have.
Does anyone have any questions? We'll go to public testimony. Anyone wishing to read that application? Well, we have a resolution from Community Board 7 recommending approval of the use of signage. So I guess we can close the hearing. All in favor? Any comments on this? Building has multiple storefronts, and for a long time has had a variety of storefront infill within those storefronts. The sign itself is a grandfathered sign, which is changing. And the commission certainly has approved all of the storefronts in this area. So I guess the question is, are people comfortable with the general configuration of the storefront?
We approve anything that looks like this multi-vein arrangement in this neighborhood. But it seems to me like a very downtown Manhattan kind of look. And
Yeah, I think so. Typically, in buildings, commercial buildings in this particular district, although this building in itself is a little bit of an anomaly, but other districts, other buildings in the district, we usually approve something that sort of evokes the more typical components of the building, and from a larger display window and a panel base. And where they're operable, we just obviously frame the operable leads, but try to do a single light in it. So that's a more typical configuration.
yeah, I don't think I have any problem with accessibility, and I guess this just shows like an improvement, right?
I don't know if any other groups of it, I sort of feel like that if the mountains and the order, that it might actually be a configuration so
What's the material?
Steel glass, brick glass.
Sorry, thank you. I actually think it might, it's really busy, and it's not, doesn't tie in with this really amazing sign up it. And it doesn't seem to really reflect some of the other commercial areas. So I agree about
I don't disagree at all. I think that the use of the glass is also, I understand why they did it on the left side where they have a column, they're hiding a column, where they're hiding
makes it kind of feel like it's not a storefront. It's not inviting in. It's very much more like a building entrance or something. So I think as a storefront technology, it's very.
Maybe it should have a metal panel at the bottom.
I'm okay with clear glass. It's just I just thought that that plus all the volumes just added up to a very standoffish kind of.
And I think if the configuration is simplified, it will also help it to relate at least a little bit more closely to the other storefronts in the building. Okay, so we'll make a motion to approve it, simplifying the configuration.
One more point, the heat lamp under the sign was something that we had brought forward to the commissioners to look at as well.
What she said that they were approving that as staff.
The security camera is staff level, the heat lamp similarly is tucked under a projecting sign. It seems like this track from anything that's projected forward. Okay, so we'll make a motion to simplify the configuration and to eliminate the vision, the special glass. Extra glass in the base.
Simplifying both Williams and Mountains, or? Yeah.
I think it's actually in there.
Yes, that's both, a version of this. Okay, matter, certificate of appropriateness, Mountain State, Street, Riverside West End, Historic District Extension. An architectural style of the building designed by Sugarman and Mercer and built in 1930 and 1931. Application is created as a I recommend, I note that the style, building style, scale, materials and details are in the pictures contributed to special architectural Riverside West End, Historic District Extension 1. I recommend approval of modifications, finding that the proposed work will not damage, obscure, or replacement of significant architectural features with the use of glass and dark finish steel framing in harmonized with the aging style of the building, that the temporary voids which we created when the bifold doors are open will be moderate in size and will not disrupt the solid to void ratio at the building's base, that the presence of security installed at the other side of the modern projecting sign head will be discrete installation to this facade. However, I find that the Thank you. I proposed multi-light configuration does not recall the large free glass display used historically at this building and does not harmonize with the criticality of the design of this facade. And therefore I recommend that you remember was not part of it. The textured glass at the base, the end of the textured glass are at the base of the omitted.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We'll give that
Okay, moving to item number 6. This is LPC 19-28138, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 1374, Lot 1, 70 North Fifth Avenue in the Upper East Side Historic District. A neo-Romanesque and neo-Gothic style hotel building designed by Schultz and Weaver and Kahn in 1926-1927. The application is to install window display on trees.
Good morning, Commissioners. Michelle Shabrani of the Preservation staff. The application before you is 781 Fifth Avenue, which is located on the corner of East 59th Street in the Upper East Side Historic District. This application is for storefront operations on East 59th Street, including the installation of new white lacquer partitions set back from the storefront blade by approximately 3 feet, creating a vitrine-like condition. The applicant is proposing to install them at 3 of the ground floor bays and 3 of the mezzanine along East 59th Street. The architect, Jamie Panchino of Valerio Architects, is here if there are questions. Does anyone have any questions?
My only question is why or why?
Jamie?
The white colour is just in response to the product. It's a very small jewel white product. It comes in a number of different colours, and it's just thought to be the best neutral background for the set off the product. It's very small, but it looks.
Friends of the Upper East Side Historic District. Friends Preservation Committee wishes to once again commend the applicant for the proposed restorative work on the facade and the replacement of the marble spandrels, which will serve to unify the 2 levels of retail storefronts. Friends feels that the proposed awnings may be superfluous, but we do appreciate that the proposal has faithfully recalled the pattern, configuration, and operation of the documented historic awnings in keeping with the building's history in the context of traditional Upper East Side storefront design. Friends finds that the white millwork background panels for the proposed show windows on the ground floor and mezzanine to be somewhat stark and wonder if the color could be softened in order to harmonize with the marble and limestone to recede from view while still adequately showcasing the products. Overall, Friends of the Upper East Side supports this application.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to speak on this application? And we have a resolution from the committee. Board 8 recommends approval. Would you like to respond to the comments about the white background? It was a question here as well, so.
The white background, we can soften the colour, and I think that's probably just some kind of neutral background is the best response to this. There really isn't another colour that we think would go. We're not trying to create a historic show.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? We'll close the hearing. Motion?
Second.
All in favor? Hearing is closed. Does anyone have any particular thoughts or comments? The historic building with storefronts that the trees were part of the retail, was not part of built commercial buildings.
I was pining for bright orange, but I think that maybe something a little bit less stark and white would be a good idea. Just my reaction to it just makes it look very two-dimensional and very non-storefront-like. So I just thought maybe something. Or with that, light gray.
People agree? Yeah. Okay, so we'll make, approve that modification.
We've already said they want to Avenue, that resides to this. Applications to install windows for the trees. Building building style, scale, materials, and features that could be special application start after the other size district narrative approval. Finding that the approval applications have the proposal not alter what they are considered features, but partitions constructed at the interior of only some of the physical windows that are made except for the interior of the storefront. Partitions can still be set back approximately 3 feet from the top and maintain sense of transparency and depth of the space. Partitions will change the space outward, create the will recall the character of display assemblies sometimes historic grounded historic structures buildings of this type style and age. The presence of these interior partitions will be seen within the context of the facade featuring
transportation, not the traffic, it's going to be our issue. We're looking at streetscapes out there, yes, fine.
All in favor? Any opposed? So it's approved. This language has to be put back.
Okay.
Moving on to item number 7, this is LPC 19-29759, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 1381, Lot 7503, 44 East 67th Street, in the Upper East Side Historic District. Art Deco-style apartment building designed by Rosario Mandela in 1940-41. The application is to construct a pergola and raise a chimney.
Good morning, Commissioners. Holly Hughes, Preservation Staff. I will be presenting the scope of work for this proposal on behalf of the applicant. This item is 44 East 67th Street, located between Madison and Park Avenue in the Upper East Side Historic District. The proposal is to construct a pergola at the setback penthouse terrace, as well as extend the existing chimney. This is being reviewed by the Commissioners due to its visibility. The pergola is being proposed at the south side of the building at the rear facade, as you can see here on the site map. A mock-up was constructed for the pergola and the chimney, both of which are visible from vantage points on Park Avenue, which is shot 1 and 2, as well as the corner of Madison Avenue, which is photo 3, and then further east on East 67th Street, photo 4. The proposed pergola features a steel structure painted to match the facade with a standing seam zinc roof. The chimney extension is being proposed to meet code, being raised a total of 2 feet 2 inches, and will be finished to match the existing chimney. The applicant is here to answer any questions that you may have.
Is there something you want to add? Yeah, okay, great.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. As Holly has introduced, this is a fairly simply designed pergola at the rear elevation of the building. It is only obliquely visible from neighboring streets, as she mentioned, on Park and the west side of Madison Avenue. On the Park Avenue side, it's visible through a rear service alley. It's a fairly limited view shed, and on the west side of Madison Avenue, it's visible within the context of other rooftop and secondary elevation accretions, including mechanical equipment, water towers, etc., which seems to be a fairly frequent occurrence in the historic district due to the mix of low-rise row houses and taller apartment buildings. And you also see it within the context of the taller mechanical bulkhead in the neighboring building, so it will remain a subordinate presence in the streetscape. The materials, as Holly mentioned, we're proposing natural zinc for the roof structure, which with a nice kind of soft mottled gray will blend into the background. It won't be contrasting, and that will diminish its visibility. The structural members are fairly slim, and there's nothing kind of on the sides, so that it will continue to read as an open structure, not a solid structure from the public right-of-way. The structural members will be painted to match the brick so as to diminish visibility. And as she mentioned, the chimney will be raised a minimal 2 feet 2 inches, will match the existing in material, detail, finish, so as not to alter significantly the existing condition. Amelie Rives Reynolds is also here, the architect on the project, so any questions? Thank you.
Okay. We will take public testimony. We may come back afterwards. Sarah Carmelatos.
Sarah Camelatos, Friends of the Upper East Side Historic Districts. Friends of the Upper East Side's Preservation Committee fears that the dimensions and permanence of this pergola structure would be far more visually impactful than the existing retractable awning. The appearance of this addition is stark and would not blend seamlessly either with this striking Art Deco apartment building designed by Rosario Mandela or the various adjacent rooftop accretions. Operable canvas awnings such as those currently installed at this unit are a common solution for shading terraces within the Upper East Side Historic District, and Friends feels that this rigid and industrial-looking zinc canopy is inappropriate due to the visibility from both Park and Madison Avenues. Friends does not support this canopy design. However, we are understanding of code requirements and we support the chimney extension should it remain necessary for this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? So we have a resolution on the board, and it recommends approval of the application. Would you like to respond to any of the comments?
Sure. So regarding the comment about the approved canvas awnings, the proposed pergola canopy will be approximately the same footprint, and again will read as open from the street without any sides or significant structural members. The design and the proposed materials, the idea is that it will blend into the background. It won't be contrasting, or it will not detract from the existing building, especially seen over secondary elevations, and in conjunction with the other utilitarian accretions at the roof and other secondary elevations.
Questions? Close the hearing. All in favor? Any thoughts?
It seems like there's a plethora of other stuff on the rooftops here, and it also appears that the closest vantage point is about 400 or 500 feet away, so I think it's
Yeah, I agree. Because if it's a secondary, you're seeing it over the secondary facade, it's not just a lot of other configurations. And it does seem like they receive what you. Okay.
in a matter of LPC 1929-759, 4367th Street, Side Historic District, an application to construct a side elevation chimney. I recommend approval finding that the proposed work will not damage or obscure any significant architectural features of the historic fabric. The pergola is an awning on clear setbacks provided current buildings are concrete within the historic district. And although the portions of the installation will be visible from Park and Madison Avenue, this will be viewed in conjunction with other rooftop and terrace accretions and will not call on new attention on sites. The design and material operating of the installations featuring base finished steel framing and using zinc roof, a chimney extension with matte finish, will be harmonious with the building's color palette and will help the installation to receive the view. And the work will not detract from the special historic and architectural character of the building or the upper side historic district.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That's approved. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioners, we're going to close the day with two public meeting items. The first is LPC 19-26642, an application for an amendment. This is in the Broadway, Block 84, Lot 7501, 140 West Street, the Broadway Basin Building, individual landmark. An American Art Deco style skyscraper designed by Ralph Walker and built in 1923-27. The application is to amend a master plan for the installation of storefronts and signage.
Good morning, Commissioners. Timothy Shaw, Preservation staff. 140 West Street, Berkeley East Building is an individual landmark bounded by West, Berkeley, Washington, and Vesey Streets. In 2014, the Commission approved the proposal for a new storefront signage master plan. The signage component of the master plan included the installation of 12-inch high bronze letters above the storefront detail, uplit by concealed light fixtures, and with 6-inch high illuminated lettering in the interior just behind the glazing of the bulkheads. The current proposal is for an amendment to the master plan to allow for more signage and mounted lettering for reference signs. Jordan Rogoff is here to walk through the presentation to explain why they need to achieve this today.
Thank you, Tim. Jordan Rogoff, DXA Studio, today's double header. Thank you for the introduction. As Kim mentioned, today we're here with hopes of getting an amendment to the master plan that was approved back in, it was actually 2013. It's been a very successful project. However, the retail tenancy in the... Sure.
I need a motion to open. Second, all in favor? Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. As I was saying, this was a very successful project for, I say, the second floor up through the building. Ground floor, we have been at market for 4 years now and are only about 50% occupied. Our client is having a very difficult time attracting retail tenants. Gets pretty far into negotiations, and when we're unable to make significant changes to the signage, they have kind of backed out. So what we're here today is to try to increase the visibility, which has been kind of the #1 factor for those difficulties. So going back to the original building, built 1926, Ralph Walker's design, this was really a retail hub. Initially, there were retailers at ground floor, and they were located directly across from Washington Market. It was a very vibrant retail area. This is an image along Washington Street. And then there's obviously a history of there being more significant signage on the building. I think when we presented in 2013, we showed that the original bell sign, or actually not original bell sign, that came a little bit later, but the bell sign that was on the building was brought down on September 11th, not replaced, and now we have a Verizon sign located there. Something happened to the PDF here, but what this is attempting to show is that there were retailers, including barbershops, located along the ground floor of the building originally. And then as Verizon, formerly Bell, expanded their operations, they lost a lot of the retail and kind of took that space over for fiber optics and different technologies as they developed. In 2013, we had a retail signage master plan approved, as Tim mentioned. The most significant signage really happened at the transom in the form of 12-inch bronze lettering. And then we had a kind of embedded and non-visible LED that uplights that at night. And then inside at the bulkhead is a small kind of light box sign that's about 6 inches tall. So many of the retailers have opted not to use that, and they've kind of just been using this. And I'll show a few examples. This was the full master plan. And here you can see signage above the doors. For the most part, the signs were located at the doors. What we're proposing today is to add additional signage up above the storefronts that's visible from a greater distance. And then the same approach that we took, having a non-visible LED located just directly below the signage that uplights that. So it's not a backlit, it's front lit, subtle lighting that at least makes it more visible at nighttime. And then we've been very careful that wherever we've located signage, we've stayed at least 8 inches off some of the decorative limestone work, depicting grapevines, which was a big part of Ralph Walker's design, showing telecommunications wiring. So that is West Street. This is for Broadway, where we have our residential entry. We just limited the retail up to towards West Street. What we're also proposing are blade signs, and I think they're about 3 inches in width. This zoning district allows for signage to project no more than 18 inches, so I think we're 17 inches by 48 inches tall, so a vertically oriented blade sign, which we'll show details of. And then this is our current anchor tenant, Marshall's, is located here on Washington Street, right by the BZ Arcade. So in their tenancy, I think they expected much more foot traffic and attribute some of that to a lack of visibility. That's one of the reasons that we're here. In most circumstances, we've just located additional signage above the doors. In this, we're proposing 2 signs, and that is because Marshall's has really created a vestibule, and there's another retailer off of that vestibule, and then Marshall's primary area is below grade. We have 4 large subcellars, so a lot of the retail is actually pulled off the street at ground level and then brought down to the subcellars. Along the Vesey Street Arcade, we anticipate in the future activating this arcade space. There's a lot of work that needs to be done with Verizon and their equipment to make that happen, but that is in the works. And so what we're proposing is where there will be entries in the future to have signage located above that. And that signage is not illuminated. We do not have the same circumstance of the cast iron work down below that we can conceal behind. So there's 3 types of masonry areas. There's the brick area, and then we have flat stone, and then we have decorative cast stone. So we've kept entirely away from the decorative cast stone. They again try to do an 8-inch buffer in each situation. This is how the building appears now. And you can see Marshall's, go to the next slide. So this is the first instance of taking that master planning signage and doing that out of, with bronze lettering. They opted to go with their logo, and I think there were no objections to doing that. And then that's how it's illuminated at night. These were some examples, in particular Rockefeller Center, with these kind of extruded or pin letters on the facade, limestone facade. We use that as an example, and it's something that the potential retail tenants were very interested in. So here's a detail showing that kind of buffer zone and the signage limited to 12-inch bronze lettering. What we're proposing here is just pin lettering, so each letter would have kind of 2 pins, no greater than a 1/4 inch diameter, and that would be drilled into the flat limestone, obviously not any of the decorative ones.
There we go off that.
Sure.
Is the cresting in the metalwork, is it significantly crowded limestone?
Yes, yes. We have a couple inches between limestone, so we're able to drop
Your LED?
Yeah, LED in there, right, without casting shadows, it kind of comes out.
Yeah, that's
No problem. So this is a little self-promotion here, but to give you a sense of logo, some of the retailers that we've talked to actually prefer to put their logo rather than any lettering. And so we're bound by zoning in this circumstance to no more than 6 square feet, so it'd be 24 by 36 approximately. And then this is the anomalous situation above the Marshall's entry, where the potential tenant that would be off the vestibule would want their own sign and then Marshall's. And then the same circumstance if they opted for logos instead. And so we have here, I think this should answer your question. This is the cast iron, and then we have this kind of nook that we're able to drop a pretty small LED and give a cut of what that'll look like. And then the same situation with the logo. So these are the blade signs. As I mentioned, we can project no more than 18 inches. So I think our cuts are actually at 17 inches. And what we're doing is a light box, but a very kind of soft light with an acrylic lens and then a metal applique over that, from which the lettering would be cut from the metal. And then these are the 2 different lighting fixtures that we would use. So this is for this goes below the lettering. So we're just about 3/4 of an inch by 3/4 of an inch. And then even smaller LEDs to go into the blade signs. And those would be done with like a 2700 Kelvin, so kind of incandescent quality soft light. And then these are renderings of the signage depicted on the building. And then this gives you a sense of the blade signs. And you should note that the masonry that we will bracket anchor through the mortar joints of the brick. And that's the last slide.
Are there any questions? Is the font you're showing in the presentation font that's going to be used by the tenants?
We did propose kind of a building-wide font based on Ralph Walker's fonts in the original building. But each retail tenant we talk to prefers to use their own logos. It's something that's very important to them. So despite our best efforts, they wanted to maintain their brand identity through their fonts.
How about for the blade signs?
For the blade signs, I think that that's likely that they're going to want to do the same thing there.
All right, thanks, Janet. And so the plate box at the bottom, which you know what is used in your...
Oh, no, I think we keep that as part of the original master plan, but so far, I don't think anyone's elected to use that.
But if that were retained, then we'd have the pin-mounted sign above and the side there also.
So how many tenants are we talking about?
That's a great question. The answer is we don't really know at this time. We could be fortunate to have a single tenant in the space, but I think more than likely what they're finding are more kind of smaller tenants are drawn to the space. That's why there's a number of blade signs, signs above the doors.
But could you even project what, okay, 1 to what, 10?
Are you showing a specific number, or is it?
I think we're showing what would be the absolute maximum.
Okay, and then my second question is, what number is that?
I think we have 9 blade signs, so I think it's either 8 or 9 potential tenants.
And then, I guess I'd like to understand better how this works. What happens when you have the arcade? Like, is there still on the inside? What's the signage like?
So the signage on, not inside the arcade. I think that is going to be something that we bring to you in the future. That's something that's in development. So we're seeing this as an amendment to the master plan, and then I think there would be subsequent presentations.
We are talking about
Right here.
4 pin-mounted signs on the exterior.
But we don't
Correct.
know what would be going on the interior.
On the interior,
It's already been permitted.
we already have something approved for the interior, and that is I think the same kind of base signage that I mentioned has not been used thus far, which is 6-inch lettering in the bulkhead.
Don't you have signage also above the transom bar?
Yes, I'm sorry, yes, we do, inside,
What percentage of the space is currently rented?
50%.
So you're saying nobody's using the signage? Right there.
Yes.
No one's using it.
Just to be clear, I do believe that Marshall's does have a little.
Oh, they did?
Yeah,
Okay.
That's what
My
I
apologies.
thought I saw that.
Got it.
And I'm not sure where else tenants are.
Yeah,
Marshall's does have the above and.
Okay, and then could you also please tell us, what is the difference in the size of the signage?
Sure.
In both of them?
At the bulkhead, let me just go back to that slide, probably the easiest, the previous approval. So this is 12-inch lettering up above, and then this is 6-inch lettering down below.
And then what about the signage on the outside?
Oh, up above,
Yeah.
what we're proposing
Yeah.
today is also 12 inches.
Okay.
So it's not larger, it's just higher up, and the thought was to see that from further away.
Visibility is the issue. 12 inches is still pretty modest. Had you considered making the signs in the storefront openings just bigger?
In the storefront openings, you mean on the
Yeah,
transit
just
bar?
having one sign.
I think we're limited with zoning to 12-inch lettering and 6 square feet per signs.
So tell me where I go wrong here. I have 9 potential tenants.
Yeah.
Right? We've got 2 per already in the plan, 2 signs per. And then we have a blade sign for each of those. And we have a sign in the above for each of those. So we're talking about a final plan of 36. Am I right or wrong?
I think that number, that's pretty close. Again, that represents a maximum. If there are larger tenants, I don't know that, I think it's unlikely that they would do all of these signs.
Could you go back to
Sure.
the prior slide?
Sure.
So I think this is a question for us. Did we approve these signs at the bottom, or?
Yes.
We did.
Yes.
Okay.
And to explain, This sign is actually in a light box inside the building.
Yeah.
So it's an angled light box. The idea was that you have visibility from a greater distance at the transom, and as you get closer and the transom's at 12 feet, that there was another sign down below for wayfinding within like a 10-foot diameter of the front door.
Any other questions? Close the proceedings. All in favor? So this is a very big building with relatively modest signage, but there are 3 signs, I guess, per entry bay, and the proposal is actually there are 2 signs approved per entry bay. The proposal is to amend the master plan to include additional signage above and bracket signage permitted.
Correct.
So, the signage above will be going into plain masonry, away from the carved stone. Do people want to break it down into the overall number and then talk about the specific ones? Yeah, okay, so Avi?
Yeah, I'm absolutely opposed to any of the proposed new signing above the storefronts. And I also think that that the bracket signs that we've been seeing are just completely wrong for these buildings, but I don't have a problem with them, their size. I think they're generally pretty ugly, but and have nothing to do with the historic designs. But I accept that they might be necessary. It's just, I think that we're not accustomed to arcades and shopping in arcades. I just came back from Turin where it's a city of arcades. And so where there's often signage sort of in the span of the arcade this way,
Yeah.
and I don't know if zoning permits that or if we can pose that, or if you can. But I would understand that much better than this, which is not going to help you anyway, these little, I mean, maybe once they use their logos, but then it's completely another sign. I would though say that, if something can happen with interior signs, lighting, so that there's more projection, sort of light from the interior of the stores, I would understand that. But again, no on any of these extra pin letters. So
The bracket signs are very not there.
Go ahead. I thought I was going to be a hard ass.
I'm with Adi on the attachment to the masonry, but my suggestion was going to be that maybe the signs above the storefronts could be mounted in that gully in between Preston and the stone, so that they were closer down to and read as part of the metalwork as opposed to being an attachment to the stonework. I think that in that case it would feel more like part of the storefront and less like an attack on the masonry. I come back to the Ralph Walker Building in Tribeca that was shown in the examples, where I thought the blade signs were very effective. I mean, look, we are going through a huge correction in the retail business, and I'm not sure how much of it is blamable on signage per se, but everyone needs an excuse. So I think that if we could keep the signage attached to the metalwork, it would be okay. I think that Adi's idea of a rail system, we saw that on the Puck Building, we saw that on the Brooklyn Borough Hall. In both cases, I thought it was very successful. And that's similar to what Adi was suggesting about the kind of cross arcade bars. I think that's a great idea. But I agree that you want to do stuff off the masonry, and I'm also okay with blades.
So if you were to bring the sign down to just above the cresting, you'd also be, you have more of a buffer from the carved stone, because it is carved stone.
Yeah.
It gets narrow.
That's right.
So that helps with that. Yes, Diane?
Yeah, I just wanted to your idea, Michael, if they're, it sounds like they're restricted in size due to the space originally, so if it's lowered, would you propose a larger size or not?
Well, I thought that I was thinking what you were saying, which is that the letters are too damn small, but if it's a zoning restriction, there's nothing we can do about
I'm
it.
not sure, yeah, I wasn't sure if the zoning restriction applied to the lower signage or.
Jordan said 12 inches.
Everything?
You know, that's why they're all the same.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just stuff that.
I think that idea would work really well if they were letters that were on the same font. Could sort of read as part of the cast iron, but I think if you get a logo, it may not work as effectively. They still look like what they apply onto that kind of stuff.
Yeah, my concern also is then the signage gets too close to the signage below it. There's already such a redundancy of signage on the facade of a retail space that I feel like, I love your idea in theory, but then I would advocate for eliminating the signage below it and making sure that they light that effectively. But I agree, I think those record signs are very helpful, and they work very well, and as long as we limit them to 1 per unit, we'll be terrific. Yes, John?
I should start on the premise that obviously I signaled, which is like the 36, approving the possibility of 36 seems to be extreme. Approaching this building, if we're to believe that the issue here is people not seeing these buildings, then the blade signs are a necessity. There's only 2 ways you see this building, right? They are walking along that sidewalk and about 18 miles across West Street. Okay? Nobody my age can see any of these signs, any of them at all from across West Street. That's just not possible. All right. So when you're walking along that sidewalk, the blades, I think, are necessary, and I would be happy to approve the full number of blades they need. Okay, whether I love them or not, I think that's a way to actually attract people's attention. Putting a sign higher on that facade, since people are going to be walking along that sidewalk, I think that misses the point. They may think that's going to help them, but nobody is going to be craning their neck to see those signs, the new ones, at that high level. So how do we solve that? Well, along the lines of what Jeannie was saying, perhaps you take the signs that we had previously approved and eliminate those, and then take the sign they proposed and bring it down into the metalwork, so it's not nearly quite that high, it's not in the masonry. But having, the 2 signs exactly the same height within, a few feet of each other, that's not really going to help you in terms of attracting people to know that your business is there. And God knows, I hope that people aren't driving by staring at these signs. But so somehow or other we've got to come to a compromise between 36 and what was previously approved.
So the 2 ways to get this solution.
Signs are going to be illuminated, correct, by LED uplighting, whatever.
John raised an interesting point there, but I would just say that there's a little, I think you do see the West Street facade from further away. Maybe us non-engineerians can't quite make it out, but I think others could. And I think from a retailer's point of view, there is a concern about visibility that may transcend practicality, let's say. So I think on West Street there might be an argument for it, but I think in the arcades I agree with you. I mean, not that we should be driven by that, but I think there is. It is a different condition.
Diana, do you have a thought about the cumulative amount of signage, and whether you could pick 2 signs here if one is lower, or whether you think it should just be signs or a sign?
How many feet is it between the 2 signs if we lower them?
like county. 9 tenants. Each tenant would have a bottom sign, middle sign, top sign, and a blade sign.
Four signs.
4 times 9 is 36. So,
I was just asking the distance between this, when we go over into the. It's not that.
I don't have that measured here, but it's about 5 feet. This is just the existing, or you can kind of see here's the existing split, and that's what that other case would be.
If you look at the
I'm okay with the signs. I don't want to see any signs on this one.
All right, so I think we don't have enough we don't have 6 people for 4 signs. So I think the best thing to do today is approval of the signs and continue to explore other ways. It's unfortunate the zoning is so restrictive. You just have a bigger sign and fence and solve the problem. So.
Can I make one clarification on?
Please motion to open.
Thank you very much. For the blade signs, I think we ask for one for each tenant with the exception of corner tenants. Like we'd like to be able to be visible from both streets in those circumstances.
Everybody okay with that? Yes.
And I completely open to the idea of integrating. I think it's a great idea that the signage into the cast iron work, the transom, in developing that detail. And if that's the case, should we come back with that detail, or can we work with staff with that?
I think right now we don't have 6 people who support that.
Okay.
Well, in your view, would that be in addition to or instead of the one that's above?
I think it would be in addition to, because I don't see any circumstance where the retail tenant would duplicate the same. I think what you would likely see is a logo in one of the locations and lettering in another location.
I would recommend seeing an alternative to that. So in other words, it would still be 3, the tenant would choose either above or the
No, I'm saying both.
I
Marshalls, we're sales
think-
every day.
Yeah. I think it's unlikely because of their proximity to one another that would be duplicative representation.
There also could be a different tenant in the seller, because the other, there might be separate tenants.
Personally, I feel these signs are very, very small, and I actually think that 4 per day won't overwhelm or detract. But I just don't think we have 6 people who are supportive of the
I could support it if he did without the arcade sign.
If I can jump in again, I'm okay with saying no to the arcade because we have the intention of returning to present more substantial alterations to the arcade. So if that makes everyone more comfortable.
But I think there are 1, 2, 3, 4 of us who, minus the logo, would be willing to do 4 signs. But I think I'm not hearing it from anybody else.
Can I say something? Yeah. I mean, really? I think we should remove the whole thing. Because I mean, maybe there shouldn't be 2 signs at the bottom. I mean, if you want a little bit of, feel like.
Kill it 18 inches. Kill it, bulkhead. I would use a
Okay, yeah.
We normally tell retailers, no signage, do something on the inside of your store. And, they put up there what appliques that say whatever they say, fall, preview, or sale. So we don't approve that. And so maybe it would make it easier for us to consider an additional sign above. If we just didn't have so many signs right there on the main window. I don't know.
I mean, on the other hand, I'm sympathetic. I think this is not like on a heavy commercial thoroughfare, and it's a building that historically had some storefronts, but they were really accessory storefronts. They're commercial buildings, you don't get a lot of people walking by anyway. So I'm sympathetic to the need to get some visibility. But maybe there is a scheme where you give people free.
I think that's certainly reasonable, is that we have an option of 4, but you're only allowed to use 3, or even removal of the bulkhead sign, because at that point, you're already inside the building and they can, have their own signage. In defense of greater visibility, Marshall's does have very large light box, pretty bright, but it's limited because the apertures, the openings are actually pretty small in the bays that they're in. It's not consistent. I think some of the other retailers will have more storefront by virtue of Walker's design with Walker glass, but in their case, they're very limited.
So would there be 6 people who would support 3 signs per day with giving the tenant option for either the bulkhead or the above one, or any combination?
I think they should stone down,
But tucked down behind the cresting.
but still visible within the stone.
Yes.
I'd say if they eliminated the bulkhead one altogether, I would get the option to make it.
I don't think we should have options either. That's why I think it's worth rethinking. Do you want to give up the bulkhead sign?
I think it's fine.
Yeah, I think it's better than having certain random, it's a master plans, we want to have it tied together.
Okay.
And originally, the reason I didn't push out that one was I thought, now it's 6 inches, but it is another piece of signage, and that helps. Anyway, my comments.
Yes, ma'am.
My fear in doing a horse trade here where the bulkhead signs are taken away is that they will be replaced with signs as large as they want, 18 inches inside the building. I say that because every time I walk past the Manny building and I see that you actually can't see into that building anymore, it disturbs me. And I see
Again, I think this is a little different than Manny, which is a transparent building. These are
signage is
streets
signage,
or
though.
fronts that are actually not that transparent. And it was separated by heavy piers that even from distances wouldn't have the same kind of visibility.
They can do anything they want, 18 inches inside that building.
You
can't do that right now.
That's true of any store. Okay, do we have 6 for 3 signs? Bulkhead sign? 1, 2, 3.
I would do it minus the bulkhead sign.
Okay. So that's modification is to eliminate the bulkhead sign. So to approve the signs as proposed.
Well, one blade per tenant except for on corners.
Yes.
And the wall masonry.
Move what?
The upper sign should not be attached to the masonry, it should be attached to the rest. What about?
Wait, what? Attached to the what?
The storefront.
Bonnie's opposed anyway. So it'll be installation, okay.
Which practically speaking means eliminating the stuff over the arches.
Right, which is what the resolution says right now.
So why don't you start with that?
Which was, sorry.
Yes, I'll do the recommendations. You want to do one.
Most of the signs are located above the cast iron storage, with the exception of at the far ends. I just want to be clear, are you asking for the elimination of those because those would be going into the brick? Okay.
Yes.
In the matter of 140 West Street, Park PVC building and individual landmark, the application is to amend a master plan for the installation of storefronts and signage. I recommend approval with modification, finding that the proposed signage that to be installed in the areas of brick and undecorated panels of stone will be keeping the previously approved signage. In terms of size and height, and will not overwhelm any significant architectural features of the building. That the bronze finish lettering will harmonize with the building's master palette, that the presence of one vertical bracket sign is determined will not overwhelm or detract from significant features at the base of this monumental building. That given the scale of this building, the modest use of internal illumination at the bracket signs will not detract from significant architectural features. And that the lettering and bracket signs will be installed in areas of plain masonry with minimal penetration that are easily reversible, and that some of the additional new signage in conjunction with the previously approved signage will not overwhelm or detract from the significant architectural feature of the skyscraper building. However,
The cumulative amount of signage as proposed today is excessive and will cause damage to the stone. And so the approval is conditioned upon the signs in the upper panels being lowered to behind the cresting and attached to the metal work. And that the signs of the arcade be limited, the bracket signs be 1 per tenant, except at the corners where you have to have 2 per tenant. And the multiple sign be limited. Okay, so with those 4 modifications, we have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Opposed.
Thank you. Okay, the last item of the day, another public meeting item. This is LPC 19-26073. Application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 4, Lot 7501, 186 Fifth Avenue, East Mile Historic District. Queen Anne style office building designed by Henry J. Hardenberg and built in 1903. The application is to replace the storefront and install signage. This application was presented at the public hearing of June 18, 2018, with no action was taken.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Holly Hughes, Preservation Staff. This item was initially heard at the public hearing on June 19, 2018, where no action was taken. At that time, the Commissioners requested the following: that probes in a site visit by staff be conducted to determine the presence of any historic materials, that the details of the proposed design be refined, including the cornice profile, storefront projection, and alignment of the columns. And additionally, some commissioners suggested exploring the introduction of masonry into the design. The applicants have revised the proposal in response to these comments and are here to walk you through these changes.
Aye.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. Ward Dennis, Higgins, Quaysbar, and partners. So I'm going to walk you through the project and the changes that we've made. We have done some very extensive probes and additional historic research, and as a result, we're able to substantially refine the proposal and I think improve it and bring it more in line with the existing building. Just as a reminder, this is at the southwest corner of 23rd and 5th. There is a circa 2000 landmarks approved storefront at the corner, and then a series of mixed storefronts dating from probably the 1960s to the 2000s, signage changes and the like. There's also, we'll see in some more detail, you can't see it in this photo, but there is a residential entry, and the commissioners did ask us to consult with the residents of the building to see if that could be incorporated into our design. So as a reminder, the original building was built in 1884, designed by Henry Hardenberg. It had a masonry base on Fifth Avenue. It had this double height opening with a recessed storefront, projecting center storefront, recessed bays, and projecting low window. In 1905, the building was substantially rehabilitated. John Snook was the architect for a new storefront and a new structural system for the entire building. And that 1905 intervention is the basis for our proposed storefront It was also a very substantial structural modification to the building, as you'll see. This is a view on 23rd Street. You can see that the residential entry, or what was then an office entry, the building entry was pushed all the way over to the west. In later modifications, it was moved one bay east. And you had these double height openings along 23rd Street as well. This is a photo actually of a gas explosion, but very good details of our storefront as it appeared in 1914, the 1905 Snook storefront, which included the prismatic glass at the transom, a projecting sheet metal cornice with sign band integrated, and projecting storefronts. So again, this is the existing condition. We had done probes, very extensively. We removed all of the 2000 aluminum storefront system and have exposed actually the original 1905 cornice and all of the structure. It was really the structure behind that was very confusing and hard to work out. And then down here you can see the stucco of what was 1960s store van that had all of this signage applied to it. So through these probes, we've been able to substantially refine the design and bring it more in line with the historic building. This is our previous proposal, which you can see is based on the 1905 Snook storefront design. This is the residential entry on 23rd Street, coming around to 5th Avenue. This design was based on the 1905 Snook, but a lot of the details were more abstracted and some not fully worked out. We have been able, through the probes, to work them out in much more detail. This is the proposed design, and we'll show you in detail what happens at 5th Avenue. On 23rd Street, you'll see that the storefronts now align with the building structural system. We did meet with the residents who at the public hearing expressed their interest in having their entry incorporated into our system. We did not get we presented them a design that included basically extending the Snook storefront design through the residential entry and incorporating this entry and egress into a single entry with a canopy, and you do see a canopy in this location in the 1905 and 1914 photos. It would be a very nice design. The residents did not get back to us on wanting to participate in that. But I will say that what we have designed here in no way prevents that from going forward in the future. So when the residents who own the condo owns this portion of the facade, if and when they come back with a proposal, that could be easily integrated into our proposal. I think would be a great improvement as well. So again, here is a detailed view of the historic images. On the left, the 1884 Hardenberg design, and on the right, the 1905 Snook design. And you can see that the Hardenberg included a lot of decorative brownstone. Everything below this string course here is either brick or brownstone trim. So you can see that there was very decorative brownstone happening around this opening, including this corbel piece here and a projecting brownstone string course. You can't see it in the signage, but this pier here matched this pier there. The 1905 storefront removed substantially all the masonry from this point to the right. And this here is actually, this is a full storefront, but it's actually covering the pier behind, which is why you have that funny mirror condition there. So in redesigning the building in 1905, they were very much upgrading it to current standards, and something you see very often in Ladies Mile. You'll also see that the building goes from a polychrome appearance to a uniform appearance because they painted the building at the same time. And they covered over this pier and removed this pier entirely. And we can see some of that in these images, also post-1905. You can see that the entire building was changed from brownstone brick to a white finish, very much consistent with how they were rehabbing buildings in Ladies Mile at the time. You can also see in this blow-up of that earlier image, you can see a column coming up behind the storefront system here. And this is a cast iron column, which we'll see in more detail in a minute, which was added in 1905 and replaced the brick piers. This is a plan from the 19-teens showing the square columns running along the facade here, with the storefront projecting, in this case, about 4 inches in front of those columns. And those columns all remain. Our new storefront will similarly project about 4 inches beyond the base of those columns. And you can see that in this image and in this image, there are no brick piers. We went back to the historic record. The top left is the original new building application, which describes the building structural system as 15-inch girders with carrying 4 beams across. You'll see that it says, when it asks about columns, it says no columns under the first floor or under the upper floors. The 1905 alteration on the bottom left states brick pier in first story, front and side to be removed, and cast iron columns set in place of same. Columns are 14-inch diameter round. There are girders over the first story to be 18 inches high. And those are paired girders, and essentially those girders are carrying the bearing wall system of both front facades, the 5th Avenue and the 23rd Street facade. The original floor beams that are described up here are actually tied into the new cast iron columns that are described here. There was an amendment later in 1905 to take the round cast iron columns and enclose them in square plate steel, filling the void with concrete, probably for fireproofing purposes. So those square columns that we see are plate iron from 1905 with round cast iron columns in the center. So we went back to the probes, and our probes very much verified all of this. You can see that column here at the corner. You can see the brick pier remaining here. And you can see here the cornice, the sheet metal cornice that we uncovered, which dates to 1905. From the interior again here, or from the exterior here, is that cornice again, and that column at the corner. This is the corner column, and you'll see that at some point, this one column was stripped of its iron plate surround, so the bottom sort of 3/4 of it is the exposed round cast iron column. This is our pier at 5th Avenue, and the girders come across over here to here. So a detail of the probes on 5th Avenue, you can see here the paired girders that were described. These are those 18-inch tall girders that are carried on the south side here by this bearing masonry pier. You can also see here and here that that corbel was shaved off completely. And we have exposed the masonry, the brownstone trim here, which is covered in asphalt. The projecting detail on that was similarly shaved back, but those roundels are still there. We have modified the proposal so that our storefront now sets back in this opening a bit, so that this whole pier in its existing condition will be restored and exposed as part of the new storefront system. On the top right, this is the bottom flange of that I-beam coming into that bearing wall pier. This piece of stone here, shaved back, is what's left of that projecting brownstone string course. All of this brick was removed to put this pier in, but this little bit of brownstone was retained. And then this is a detail of the sheet metal cornice that was exposed as part of all this. On the north end of the Fifth Avenue facade, this is the cast iron column with its plate iron enclosure. Very hard to see here, but if you look above, you will see that the round cast iron extends 18 inches above. So the Fifth Avenue girders paired come in this way and are carried on this shoulder. And then the cast iron extends up another 18 inches, and the girders that carry the 23rd Street facade sit above that. So there you have an 18-inch girder going this way, and then a pair of 18-inch girders extending out. And those 18-inch girders would be way up in here or way up in here. So they very substantially removed all the masonry, essentially below the second floor on 23rd Street and on most of Fifth Avenue in order to make this intervention. And we can start to see that here. This cornice is covering over this area here, and if you count the coins, you'll see that this cornice comes up to about this level here. And this brick and this brownstone were all removed as part of inserting the columns that run down 23rd Street, and the 18-inch girders on Fifth Avenue start at about that level, about 4 bricks up from where the coin had been. This just represents what was removed in terms of the brick masonry and the brownstone masonry, including that coin here and this piece of brownstone that was shaved back. All of this brick up to at least this level was removed, and up to this level is covered over by the cornice. Here it is represented again graphically. You can see the new opening that was created. The dotted lines represent the cornice coming up to this level and pointing here. And the straight lines here represent that 18-inch paired girder system that comes through, which you can see right here. So all the masonry above that below that 18 inches, the top flange, was removed. There was probably some rebuilding in here. Still a little uncertain how the outer white of brick on the facade is carried because that girder sets back slightly. This is a section through on Fifth Avenue. This is actually incorrect. It should be 2 girders showing here, but schematically it does represent the structural system of the girders carried on the south side by the brick pier, and the girders carried on the north side by that shoulder cast iron column. We did look at how we could go about introducing brick into the corner column. The space between the column and the outer face of the brick on the upper stories, which we would have to align with, is 4 1/4 inches. We would need to get some amount of waterproofing and structural support for brick ties into that 4 1/4 inch space. We think that we can do that with brick that are 2 inches thick, but that's about the maximum thickness that we could get. We would probably need, in some places, down to more of a veneer system. And in some places up here where these paired girders come out, at least to that second white of brick, we would similarly have to have some sort of veneer brick system. But all of this would be a veneer system with brick ties, with which are very difficult to get the proper tolerances for joint spacing. This is a thin width butter joint type facade, which is a difficult detail to realize when you start introducing brick ties. All of this is to say that something is possible here, but it would very much be skin deep. We think that it would also not be appropriate to have a mix of brick from replicating the 1884 condition and the glass facade of the 1905 condition mixed in the same area. We had a question of how far would this return onto Fifth Avenue and how does that terminate. So this sort of false sense of history mixing of eras, we did not think was appropriate, which is why we stayed with the proposal to keep the 1905 Snook design. But what we have done is modify the details of the design and also increase the extent to which we are exposing all of the actual original building fabric of 1884 that does survive. So you can see here that we've now set back this storefront, and I think actually this would be a continuous line across, so that this whole pier inside and out is exposed, and that's the pier with the brick and the decorative brownstone. The small area of brownstone up here that survives would similarly be exposed and restored, and this whole pier really becomes part of the overall design. So you can see that originally we had the sign band extending over. You'll also see that the proportions of the storefront have changed slightly based on counting bricks and measuring and the like. And then secondly, this area of the storefront here on 5th Avenue is recessed not only to expose this pier, but also to center this whole element below the second-story window. So this recess here starts to recall a bit that original recess in the building. And you can see also that as a result, the show window on the right side proportionally matches the pier on the left side. So we now have a more balanced facade on 5th Avenue and a recessed facade that exposes more of the original historic fabric that does remain on the building. On 23rd Street, our original proposal essentially matched what was done in 1905. The 1905 storefront really had no relation to the structure of the building above. They just continued the module straight down. So what we've done on 23rd Street is we've reoriented the mullions so that the major mullions line up with the piers and line up with the columns behind, and the minor mullions line up with the center of the windows. I already talked about the 5th Avenue entry, but as we said before, this design could easily incorporate a revised residential entry if they decide to come forward with that application. So here it is represented graphically, the orientation of the facade on 23rd Street to the structural base of the building and the structure of the columns. So this slide shows the evolution of the facade, starting with the 1884 Hardenberg design. These are the infill on 23rd Street is very schematic representation because we don't know exactly what it looked like. But we did have the brick piers coming down. This is the 1905 Snook design. And then this is the existing condition, which the 2000 version was sort of a watered down interpretation of the Snook design. I think what's significant here is if you look at 1905 compared to what we're proposing, we're very close to that. The overall proportions are much more in line with the 1905, with the exception of this area here, where again we're exposing the historic fabric, and this area here where we do not control the residential entry to be able to do anything there. As before, we looked at precedents for John Snook design storefronts in Ladies Mile. There are a few, and we were able to derive a lot of our details from that, including the corbelling at the base, the treatment of the mullions and transom bars. So this is what was previously proposed, and you'll see that now the cornice on the right is the revised proposal. The cornice projects much more. The profile now matches what remains on the building, and this bottom profile has changed. And I think most significantly in this, we have now, the storefronts are in the same plane. What we've done is actually push back the bulkhead into the storefronts so that we now have room to get proper corbel underneath there. Before we were sticking with the facade of the building, so we had a very abstracted or watered down corbel. But on 23rd Street, we now have a full projecting storefront with much greater depth and this corbelling detail. On 5th Avenue, we do not have the corbelling because we pulled this whole section of the storefront back again to expose this pier and align with the window above. These are details of the proposed cornice, again, closely matching the historic. We now have 1.5-inch halo lighting versus, I think we had about 4 inches overall before. So the lighting has gotten shallower, the cornice has gotten deeper. This lower element of the cornice is now better articulated. Can we get the storefront section? You can see here the details on the bulkhead with the corbels. We've also changed this lower element on the lower sill element on the storefront so that it has a profile that is historically appropriate. As before, our storefront sections are built up aluminum and sheet metal. So you can see that this is not a stock design, it's a very custom design. We're using historic stamped sheet metal in the center to create this built-up section. So I think we can send that around if you like, but it creates a very substantial and quite customized storefront system that very closely reflects the historic precedents that we've seen. Additional details on the changes to the details here. We've revised the renderings. The rendering from before was taken straight on, so it's actually, I think, very difficult to see. But this whole section of the storefront is set back into the opening so that it aligns here and exposes this here. And then you can see that there's been slight changes in the proportion of the other elements. And then on 23rd Street, you can see what happens with that corbel base and how that corbelling increases the depth substantially on 23rd Street and brings it much more in line with the historic 1905 Snook storefront. That's it.
Are there any questions? Okay, so a motion to close the proceedings. All in favor? Aye. So, this is kind of a fascinating application and discussion for us. The Ladies Mile Historic District designation talks about how this district is really characterized by these sort of 6 major periods of development that resulted in sort of very building technologies and storefronts that reflected the kind of changing nature of retail. And so the first period of development was residential, and then the next period was early commercial and the entertainment industry moving into the area. Then they moved into office building, large department stores, commercial palaces, and eventually, when clothing was being ready to wear, there started to be warehouses and manufacturing buildings to manufacture the clothing. So each of the periods actually are reflected in all of the buildings. So some buildings were replaced with buildings that served retail needs, and some were altered. So this layering on existing buildings is pretty typical of the district. The other thing that the report talks about is that some of the buildings in this district were designed by very famous architects, and some were designed by architects who specialized in commercial architecture. This was a period where architecture had become a field, and so all of these buildings had architect stamps, and it was a variety of these types. So I think in this building, this kind of embodies a lot of what the report describes in this district. It's a building that was designed by a very famous architect. It had that was for offices in kind of the middle development phase, and it had a commercial layer added to it by a notable architect who was very prolific in New York, who actually designed the 18th-story building, which was really the first department store, and designed a lot of the cast iron buildings in Soho, as well as some other buildings and stores in this district. And that was a commercial layer added to an office building that reflected a later period of development. And so then now the existing condition, there isn't any historic storefront framing, but there are some fragments from each period, and the structural system reflects that 1905 alteration. So I think it's a very interesting discussion about what the right thing to do is, and I think, there's options include restoring it to the Hardenberg design, restoring it to the J.B. Snook design, Snook Sons design, or doing some hybrid. And I think in this case, there's a little bit of a hybrid because they're retaining historic fabric from the earlier period as kind of an artifact, and also shifting mullions to kind of relate a little bit better to the Hardenberg facade above. But I think it's a very interesting discussion. I'm not sure there's a right answer. I'm looking forward to hearing all of your opinions. I personally think it's appropriate to restore it to the Snook and Sons period and design, given the existing conditions. But I'd like to hear from others. Yes, Ani.
Thank you it's very helpful to hear you count the various histories. And I would say that it's clear that we're in a new period in this area with nomadic further north, where so many of the historic significant buildings that we didn't even notice, it seems, in the 80s, certainly even into the 90s, are now being reused for hotel and other purposes and are being restored. And similarly, the absolute renaissance in the park itself, the change to the toy district, and it's much more, whether it's Italy or other shops, things are changing. And so I would say this is an extraordinary opportunity and to see this building as it was in the 1880s and 1884, that the original design, its scale, the scale of those openings is so interesting and unusual, and I recognize precedes the Flatiron itself, which was 1901, 2 or something. But it would be an incredible opportunity, I think, and I would hope that it would happen for that to come back, the rebuilding of those piers, and especially since it seems that there's only one tenant, so it's not the period that you brought up, which had to do with the ready-wear shops. That's even later. And so the photograph that's here of the shops on the ground floor, many shops, would make sense in this case if there were multiple tenants. But it seems like we're going to a one-tenant deal. But I realize that tenancy is not necessarily our issue. I would though say that I could understand even a hybrid, and I heard that you were not inclined towards hybrids, but the hybrid would be, and maybe this is just too much, but the restoration of the piers, brick piers, but then with the possibility of a band across it that is a kind of, still reminds us of this, of the period in 1911-12 and subsequent history, and maybe serves as signage, but is not the full storefront. So I guess that would be my take.
Okay, so not at all. Okay.
Like it's one of the options that
it's
you proposed.
Yeah. Yes, Diane.
I find this approach fairly successful, really, because I think that it's trying to go as close as it can to a period which is very reflective of the district, and at the same time, I think just the minor changes, I think, like adjusting the mullions so that they do relate better to the original design of the upper stories is a good thing to do, and I think that trying to capture as much of the cast iron restored or replicated is desirable. And I think it's, we often talk about trying to represent stages in a building, so I don't personally feel the need to return to the original design. I think that capturing this particular period, because there are a lot of elements that are still there structurally, and is appropriate in my view. So I actually would approve this presentation.
Sorry, I forgot to add that I actually do think that what they're proposing is appropriate.
Oh,
I just would wish for something more.
Thank you.
This one actually seems to me to be relatively easy, which is to say we have at least two very significant periods in the history of the building, and they've chosen to restore to one of those two periods. And I'm happy with that one, and in fact, especially in light of the complication involved in going back yet older than that, to the first period. I think this is perfectly fine. It doesn't really, I'm not really struggling with this at all.
I guess I understand the argument about choosing one version or the other. I guess I'm looking at this as, this is not a restoration, this is a recreation. And therefore, and admittedly, it's not an accurate recreation, it's a corrected, quote unquote, quasi-recreation. And so, once one kind of is in the recreation department, I think that one has to choose what is the preservation objective that is addressed by the recreation. Okay. I think that while there are many storefronts of the type that Snook created, including several by Snook, that are in the district. I think that the relative uniqueness of this building's initial iteration, initial version, suggests to me that it would not be appropriate to put back this particular storefront in this particular form, in this location, and that the preservation objective would be better served by recreating something that was closer to the Hardenberg. I do want to say that I think the work they've done on the storefront is very good. I think that the craft and the materiality is very lovely. But I think that the basic decision, I think if there were some significant material from the Snook period that could be, that could make it into a restoration, then I might buy it. But I think if it's a recreation, I think I have to go on the other side.
I agree that this is a hybrid in that it's not exactly a restoration, but it is sort of a reimagining of what the previous storefront was. And I do think it is something that actually works and it is appropriate, but I too would like to see a little more masonry, and some of that masonry that was back there at one time, at least the cornice, I think should have been a little heavier.
Well, the Snook cornice is a sheet metal cornice which they're replicating. The masonry had a sort of different configuration and was actually lower than this.
So I guess a little of the masonry, but
It had
I don't think it's
banding.
appropriate.
Okay.
That was just
Michael?
taste.
I'm in agreement with Commissioner Noble.
I do think this is appropriate given the changes and the phases and the times is that, I obviously wish that we are going to the reality in terms of, the detail. This is a different era. We have banks and pharmacies at every corner. And I think the applicant have taken a tremendous effort to replicate some of the possible details and to like the base that the treatment. I think the finishes are separate.
Okay. I think it's appropriate. I do agree. I am sort of, it's unfortunate that there couldn't be more masonry at the entrance and that the arch above could be a little more connected to the entrance into the base. Because I think after the building's still on the spring, but I'm fine with that.
As is, yeah, I think, restoring the masonry, I think you have to sort of reimagine the structural condition altogether. So, but I think it seems like we have 6 who are comfortable and find the proposed scheme to evoke the snook design to be appropriate. So, I guess it's my turn. Can we have a motion to close the hearing? All in favor?
Aye.
Yeah, how about you? Thank you, Wellington.
In the matter of 186 Fifth Avenue, Ladies Model Store District. A Queen Anne style office building designed by Henry Hardenberg and built in 1883. Application is to replace the storefront and install signage. I note that the style, scale, materials, and details of the building are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Ladies Now Historic District. I further note that the ground floor underwent significant alteration in 1905, designed by the noted architectural firm of John B. Smith and Sons, including the removal of 2-story bays and associated brick piers and installation of highly glazed projecting storefront. I also note that the Ladies Now Historic District encompasses an area defined by a variety of buildings reflecting the changing nature of retailing, commerce, and manufacturing, as well as advances in building technology during the second half of the 19th century and in the first 2 decades of the 20th century. These buildings reveal the history of New York's commercial architecture as it evolved. I recommend approval, finding that the current storefronts are mismatched and unsympathetic to the building and the streetscape, and that the proposed storefront will bring uniformity to the base of the building, except at the entrances to the upper floors that are outside the scope of work and ownership. That the proposed storefront in a reinterpretation of the 1905 John B. Smith and Sons design will return the building base and the building to a condition that recalls this significant later alteration and reflecting a significant period of development in this historic district. That probes have determined that the only extent significant architectural features at the base are one Hardenberg design masonry pier at the Fifth Avenue facade and the Snook design cornice, and that these elements will be incorporated into the new design. That the configuration, materials, details, and finish of the proposed aluminum storefront infill featuring a projecting cornice, clear glass display windows, patterned glass and louvered transoms, and profile trim above the recessed bulkhead, all with black finish will recall the historic storefronts designed by John B. Smith and Sons at this building and other buildings of this age and style, and will be compatible with the streetscape. That the proposed storefront mullions at West 23rd Street, at the West 23rd Street facade, lined with the masonry piers, interior columns, and therefore strengthen the relationship and alignment of the storefronts and the piers at the upper floors of the facade. That the proposed projected metal sign band and stainless steel pin-mounted letters installed continuously above the storefronts will recall the historic sign again condition, and that zero illumination of the metal letters will be consistent with similar installations in this historic district and will not detract from the streetscape. And that the proposed work will not diminish the special architectural or historic character of the building or the ladies around the historic district.
Okay, and just before we actually call the vote, I want to note, just for the record, that we did receive an email and a letter. These were both made available to you in your portal, but one is from Historic Districts Council saying that the proposal doesn't resolve any of the issues raised last time because they feel it looked identical to the previous proposal. And the letter is from a representative of the board for the upper floors who feels that the harder brick design should be returned.
And one from me.
Sorry?
And one from me, the Society for the Architecture of the City, sent an email yesterday before.
Okay, we'll look for that. Okay, thank you, Isabel. Okay, so all in favor? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 1, 2. Okay, 6 and 4. Great. Okay, so that's it for today. Thank you all.